Welcome to On the Bubble Podcast, episode 102. I'm your host, Sabasa J. Wida, and with me is my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. Today, we're going to be doing an episode on how to draft Fang episode. This is going to be part of our three-part series for all three of the Hunted Heroes, and this is going to be number 2. If you want to know about Syndra, we'll talk about it last week, and then next week, we'll talk about Arachne. But before we do that, how was your week, Yuki? You played an RTN this weekend?
I played a draft RTN just locally. It was a pretty small turnout. We only had 14 players, which meant we had an 8-man pod and a 6-person pod. I was in the 6-player pod, and I went 1-2 on Arachne in my first draft. But I did sort of get paired into the person that went 2-1 and the person that went, and then I got paired up into the person that went 3-0. So yeah, it was a little bit of a weird pod because there was like some pair up, pair down shenanigans, and we ended up with 4 1-2s, a 3-0, and a 2-1 in our pod, and I ended up top 8ing despite going 1-2. And then in top 8 draft, I drafted Arachne and ended up winning out the pod. So a little bit of a roller coaster there, but if you play a 6-player pod and you're a third Arachne, it's a little bit tough.
Yeah, and it was capped at 16 players, and it was originally capped, right? Because of the store size and the time constraints that they had for the store.
Yeah, we originally had 16 signed up, but 2 people couldn't come or they didn't show. So yeah, we ended up playing with 14, and it was a little bit strange. There was 2 people that made it at 1 and 2, which is unusual, but is what it is. I think there was a reasonable chance that my deck might have gone 2-1 had I not gotten paired up into the crazy Syndra deck with like Dragon Power and Wrath of Retribution. But yeah, that's how it goes, I guess. But yeah, that was a pretty fun event, and I guess other than that, I've been doing like a little bit of draft here and there, a little bit of CC, and working a bunch on Syndra content for the Patreon. So the Syndra deck list I took to Memphis, ended up winning the event in the hands of Brody, and then ended up winning the call in Christchurch in the hands of Sean. I forget Sean's last name, but anyways, shout out to both Brody and Sean for winning on Syndra. Both their lists were very, very close to mine. And yeah, huge congratulations to you. And if you want to learn more about that Syndra deck list, the Red Line Syndra deck that's been running around and doing very well, I think it had 11 RTN wins, then you can find that on patreon.com/onthebobble. There's a sideboard guide with all the matchup notes that you need. And there's also a how to play guide in case you're curious to how to play the deck, what are some of the key play patterns, how to use the equipment, how do you sequence for Masco Momentum, all that kind of stuff and more is available on Patreon.
Yeah, I also went to the same RTN as well as Yuki, but I also went 1-2 as Arachne, losing to 2 Arachne mirrors, and I bubbled out. So yeah, if we had all 16 players at the draft RTN, it would have ended up being like a clean cut at 2-1 would all make it. But because 2 people no-showed, 2 people at 1-2 made it in.
Yeah, there was a world where it was like 1-1-2 made it in, but it kind of depended on the 6-player pod and what happened. And just because of the way that the pair up, pair down, and win-loss went, it just ended up being like a bunch of 1-2s. And it was kind of funny.
Even though it was like a 14-player RTN, it was a pretty sweaty RTN, right?
Yeah, there was a lot of strong locals. We've talked about it before, but I think Vancouver's draft scene is pretty strong. Typically, when we go to nationals, we do okay in CC, like decent compared to Toronto, which is also just like a very strong area, just high density of good players. But when it comes to draft, I think we typically do quite well. In the past, we would do extremely well. Like I think our locals would hardly lose except to our locals in the first couple of nationals, but I think that the gap has narrowed a little bit. But I do think that Vancouver overall still pretty strong draft scene.
That's enough for our week. So let's move right into our main topic today. It's going to be how to draft Fang. As usual, we're just going to be talking quickly about the block values on the cards that Fang gets to play. So same as last week, we're going to start with the Draconic cards. We had 10 commons. We have 5 3 blocks, 2 2 blocks, 3 no blocks, 6 rares at 2 3 blocks, 1 2 block, and 3 no blocks. So the Draconic cards, as usual, does not block too well in this set. And similarly to last week, we're going to talk about generics real quick. 12 commons. We have 3 blocks, 6 2 blocks, and 2 null blocks at common. And then the 8 rares at 4 3 blocks, 1 2 block, and the 3 null blocks, but then 2 of them being Calming Breeze and Sigil of Solace. So the rares, a generic block pretty well, but the commons do not. But the commons that do block well are the blue 3 blocks that got added into the set. So moving on to just like the warrior cards in the set, there will be 24 commons at warrior or draconic warrior, and 17 of them block for 3, and only 7 of them block for 2. And then they have 12 rares, which 7 of them block for 3, and 5 of them block for 2. So compared to ninjas, this is like a significant increase in 3 block value, right, Yuki?
Yeah, warrior blocks very, very well in this set, and the big pattern is that I believe all 7 of the 2 blocks for warrior are the draconic warrior attack reactions, specifically the starters that can be played on the first chain link, and then there's a couple of second chain link cards like Sisters of Fire that block 3, and then just general warrior cards that block 3. So you actually get a lot of block value from your warrior cards, and Fang decks, unlike Syndra decks where like you really had to prioritize the generic 3 blocks, and you probably have some 2 block blues. I think that having all or nearly all 3 blocks blue for Fang is like pretty doable and something that you should be trying to do. You do need to still pick things at a little bit like higher rate because all the draconic cards only come in red, but you have way more access to 3 blocks in Fang than you do in Syndra.
Yeah. And I guess we'll also talk about the warrior assassin split cards, and which there's 10 commons, and it's 4 3 blocks, and 6 of them block for 2. And then there's 6 rares, and all of them block for 2. These ones don't block as well as like the warrior class cards. I thought like assassin and warrior cards block pretty well, but I guess in this set the split cards don't block too well.
I think that in general, they seem to have moved the blocking power into the classes outside of the D reacts, and then Assassin Warrior is a little bit special in that they get Incision as a 3 block attack reaction with no other text. But then their other commons, there are also attack reactions and block 2. So most of the attack reactions ends up blocking 2, and there's just like a handful of them that block 3 is kind of the way that it works out. And since most of the Assassin Warrior cards are like dagger pumps and attack reactions, they tend to block 2 because they essentially have like go again. It feels like the cards that have go again or like easy go again usually block 2, and the cards that don't have block 3. Although warrior kind of gets to cheat and has some pumps that you play before you attack with a weapon that also block for 3 and just have go again. So yeah, I don't know. Warrior pretty good in that regard.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think as you said, the warrior assassin split cards all have to do with like the dagger theme. Obviously, except for the defense reaction with the Den of the Spider, they all like have something to do with dagger. They pump daggers, or the Majestics like perforate. What does this card do? You may attack with target dagger an additional time. But yeah, all the cards in this vein has something to do with daggers. Okay, so we'll move on and talk about the equipment that Fang has access to. The first one to talk about is still the Guardwell cycle. This is the rare generic cycle with Guardwell. These are, I think, the best cards in the set, and they'll block for 1, but if it's blocking a weapon, it will block for 1 more. So you almost always get 2 points of value from these equipments, and I think you should work towards getting both, and it's not that much work to get both, so I think always play these.
Yeah, the Guardwell's so good. Just it feels like if your opponent has like 1 piece of Guardwell, it's like that's really good. And if they have like 2 pieces of Guardwell and you don't, it's like, oh man, this is gonna be a hard game. Is kind of what it feels like to me.
Yeah, it just feels like the moment they like present 1 Guardwell, it feels like you're down an equipment piece, even though you drafted 4 pieces.
Mm-hmm.
It's I guess they like lose out a rare from their deck if it was powerful, but like. Yeah, like I guess it could have been like a powerful rare, like a power stance or something like that, right?
Yeah, it could have been. I don't think Power Stance is as good as Guardwell, though. I don't think much is as good as Guardwell. It being generic, in addition to just like always making your deck better and being like basically always best in slot, is like it's just so good.
Is do you think these will compare to like legendary equipment from like WTR or like Arcane Rising, like back in the day when you can still play the L's?
It's like a little bit lower than that, I think, but it's maybe the closest we've had in a while. They do feel really, really pushed.
Oh, you know an equipment that I'm thinking of right now is the Good Time Chapeau from Heavy Hitters. It's like that level, right?
Yeah, yeah, it might be pretty close to Good Time Chapeau. I think Good Time Chapeau might still be a little better. Has the activated ability and temper too instead of just the two block, but it's a nice comparison for sure. I think that they're yeah, it just feels like a very significant advantage if you have guard wall.
Then Fang has other equipments he can play, and that's going to be the Vengeance Cycle, which is the Draconic Anti-Arachne Cycle. He also has access to Red Alert. So the Red Alert cycle is a cycle that the Assassin Warrior gets, and it says if an attack reaction has been played or activated this chain link, it gets +1 block value, and it is a base Iron Rod, so it's just base block for 1 with Blade Break. How good is this cycle of equipment?
I really like Red Alert. I think it's really good. I actually think it is better than Leapfrog overall. Leapfrog has some added utility where like you can kind of use it as a D-react, especially in multiples. It can be pretty strong situationally. But it's just pretty easy to get 2 value out of Red Alert, especially into Fang, which is like pretty popular deck. It seems like people really like drafting Fang. And then even into Arachne, there are spots where you can just set it up and be like, I'm going to get my extra value, or you don't react. And then like, I'm also pretty happy. So I found that the Red Alert is just like pretty important.
Yeah, this is you do have to work for it, and it isn't a it's not two blocking two against Sidra, but against the other two heroes, it feels almost close to the Guardwell cycle.
Yeah, yeah. Especially Fang. I think getting 2 block out of this against Fang is like generally pretty free. If they have like instance, then they have instance and they get around it. There's not that many Draconic instance. So
Yeah, that's true. That is true. The instants don't work on this card. Oh, that's yeah. We're gonna talk about some of the instants, but definitely one of them is kind of absurd, and this is another reason why it's absurd, right?
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Other than the cycles, we also have Code of Allegiance. We talked about this last week as well, but this is the Draconic chess piece that grants you 1 resource, and you can only play Draconic cards for the rest of the turn. Notably, this card is great in Fang because the warrior cards that are front pumps, you can play that first and then activate Code of Allegiance, and then like just have a Draconic reaction in the later chain, or you can just like do like cut deep, Code of Allegiance into like a dagger and just like call it a day, right? Like, what is this? The requirement of like until end of turn you may only play cards that are Draconic. Like, you get to completely ignore this line of text in this deck.
Yeah, the fact that you get to do it like it not having to be your first action feels kind of messed up in Fang specifically. So yeah, you can pretty easily circumvent this restriction that it has. Like you said, it helps with red bricks if you have no way, because like pitching to swing a dagger never feels good, but then your dagger pumps all want you to swing a dagger, so you like kind of have to just pitch to swing a dagger. But then if you brick on reds, this can just give you very efficient hands. You can also do the thing that Syndra does with it, where if you have like a Draconic 1 for 5, you break it, play the Draconic 1 for 5, and you have a 1 card 5, which is really good. So yeah, this card's really good in Fang.
And I guess the last card to talk about will be Starting Point. Starting Point is the Assassin Warrior leg piece, and this card reads: attack reaction, destroy this, target attack gets go again. Activate this only if you played a card or activate an ability this reaction step. This means that if you've already played a Draconic reaction, your dagger already has go again. What other uses other than maybe like playing an incision on your card and then giving it go again manually?
Yeah, so it does let you play those warrior reactions and have some consistency. You can break a fealty for this as just like an onboard way to enable it.
Do you want to elaborate on the fealty? How does Starting Point and fealty work together?
So yeah, the main interaction is that you can use fealty and break the fealty, which counts as a card being activated and you can do this during the reaction step, and then that will enable starting point to get go again as like an onboard kind of go again enabler and sidestep that's really powerful. So if your opponent blocks a bunch, you can give it go again and present another chain link. The other thing that you can do with this is the Arachne equipments are all attack reactions, and you could pop an Arachne equipment plus starting point to get go again. And this notably even works against Fang and Syndra, but you don't get the effect from the Arachne equipment. You just are using two equipment to get go again, which is a bit expensive, but worth knowing that you can do it. There will be spots where it's worth doing it, mostly if people overblock.
Okay, you're talking about the vengeance cycle, right? Where it's like the attack reaction, you destroy it as a cost, and then like, for example, like Vow of Vengeance, which is a headpiece, it says attack reaction, destroy this, mark target Arachne. Do you not need to have a target for some of these?
I guess some of them you need a target, and then some of them you do not.
I see. So you wouldn't be able to use the headpiece without a target Arachne, but you will be able to use a
chest piece, I guess, is the big one. You can't use Hand of Vengeance either because it says target attack that is attacking Arachne. So I guess it's literally just Heart of Vengeance that works with this. Okay.
Oh, okay. So it is only the chest piece that works with it. Okay.
Yeah, because that says your next attack this turn that targets Arachne costs one less to play or activate. But well, it's an instant, notably, also not a reaction, but that's fine. Instants work. So you can activate Heart of Vengeance. You won't get the resource reduction because you can't attack an Arachne, but you will enable your starting point. But Hand of Vengeance and Vow of Vengeance won't work, and then boots are in the same slot, so it doesn't really matter.
Okay. That's good to know. Look, learn something new every day.
Yeah, I thought it worked with all of them, but yeah, I guess you need a target for the head and the gloves.
I guess, do you want to talk about maybe like the two main packages of like Fang decks that you can do? Or like typically we talk about like two different decks we can build. Why are we talking about them in two different packages this time?
Yeah, because I think that Fang's archetypes are kind of on a bit of a scale. You can lean basically more of the warrior side without the Draconics and have more of the mark cards, and you get a lot more 3 blocks. Or you can lean more into the Draconic package that will get more consistent go again because the Draconic reactions give your Obsidian Fire Vein go again, M+1, but they also tend to block too. And so there's sort of those two lanes you can go, and I think you can be like pretty heavy Draconic, you can be pretty heavy Warrior, and you can be a mix of the two. So unlike Syndra, where we kind of said that like the red line archetype and the lake tap or like blue pitch archetype is like a little bit separate, I think that Fang is much more able to blend between these archetypes so long as you have a good mix of the important parts. So the Draconic reacts, the marks, and the Warrior reacts are kind of like the pieces that we're looking for. And we'll kind of unpack each of those as we go through.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes sense. Do you think there'll be a good reason to like go in deep to one side or the other side? Or do you think it's like kind of usually better to be somewhere in the middle?
I think most often you'll wind up somewhere in the middle and have a little bit of a blend. And I think a lot of it might depend on partially your preferences as well as what cards you're seeing. I've had times where somebody's taking the Draconic attack reactions aggressively, so I wind up more of the Warrior side, or somebody's taking the Warrior side aggressively, so I wind up more of the Draconic side. But often if you have two Fangs, depending on what the other person is biasing, you might bias the other way. So I think a lot of it has to do with your seat.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, then I guess we should start by talking about the key cards for Fang, and these should be the cards that are good in like regardless of what kind of package that you're trying to make.
Yeah, so the first cards that I'm looking for in Fang are efficient ways to mark. Regardless of whether you're getting Fang's hero ability online or not, marking and having fealty is really powerful. So the most premium of these are cut from the same cloth. I actually like this at every pitch. This card into Fang and Arachne especially is just like really unfair. The information is really good, and then you also get the mark, and it's also just a 0 for 4 at red. I like the yellows and blues too, though. They're still pretty good. I like the D-Reacts, so Smoke Out and Den of the Spider. We've talked a lot about the D-Reacts in the Syndra episode. Same thing for Fang, just efficient ways to mark. And then finally, Scar Tissue as a 0 for 3 Dagger React. It's not Draconic, so it won't give you go again on its own, but it does mark on hit, which is really good.
Do you like Scar Tissue at yellow and blue as well, or do you think it's just like the red one that's good?
think it's mostly the red one. You don't really want to play a 0 for 2. It's like serviceable. You can play like a yellow scar tissue and it's not the end of the world, but it's not what you're hoping for. And I don't really like the blue. It's a blue 2 block, and Fang just has so many blue 3 blocks that I'd rather have a blue 3 block.
Yeah, I think because you have access to so many like blue 3 block, you don't really want to tax your blues in this way, right? It's only giving +1 and on hit mark, and sometimes +1 won't even be enough to put your dagger over top of someone's block anyways.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, just not the most efficient card. Again, like you can play the blues. It's not a disaster, but it's not what you're hoping for.
Yeah, maybe like the 30th card or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Then next on the list, I think these two cards are basically the same card, and it's gonna be my favorite card for Fang. It's Cut Deep and Twist and Turn. They're basically the same card. So Cut Deep reads, it's a 0 cost warrior action that says your next dagger attack this turn gets +4 and go again. And Twist and Turn basically has the same line of text and some additional line of text that I don't think I've ever used. These are like the most efficient, I guess, similar to Cut from the Same Cloth, but with a 3 block instead of a 2 block, right? Do you still like these at like yellow and blue as well?
The blues are blue 3 blocks. They can convert for 2 damage on offense, which is nice, and I like the yellow quite a bit. I just like that this always converts for 3 on offense or defense, and they can also be a resource card in a pinch. Yellows are generally like pretty serviceable in Fang, actually. I think that Fang kind of happy with yellows, which is cool. And I think that something I'm coming around to on this format is I think that because the cards are such high quality, there are some yellows that are just actively good in your deck for consistency. And I think Cut Deep's a good example. I think that the floor that you want on your yellows is you want them to be able to convert for 3 on offense at least some of the time. So if it's like a conditional 3 go again, that's pretty good. And I think that Cut Deep is just like unconditional 3 go again. It's always 3 block, and it's a resource card, and that just kind of ends up being really good. But I think in the same vein, we talked about like Fire Tenet Strike First last time for Syndra, being a yellow that converts for 3 go again on offense, gives you a breakpoint, is a yellow pitch, and it only blocks 2, but still pretty serviceable. And I think that these yellows that are like 3-point cards and just give you some hand scaling so you can play big hands, you can play small hands are really important, because the power level of this set is just so high that I think you kind of need to be getting 3 out of all your cards. I think if your hands are just like always worth 12, it kind of keeps you in the game and keeps the games really, really close. And I think as soon as you start doing like a 3 card 6, you fall behind. And I think that the yellow Cut Deep, yellow Twist and Turn, and these other examples of this that like convert for 3 some of the time are just like pretty good cards for consistency. Like yellow Cut from the Same Cloth, I also like.
I guess a question would be, which one would be your favorite color to put into your deck? Is it still the red one, or?
I think it's red, then yellow, then blue. Blue's like sort of hard to say because I think that blue ends up just largely being a blue 3 block. It's like a fine blue 3 block, but I think that it's like the difference between Cut Deep and another blue 3 block doesn't feel that big, but at yellow, Cut Deep being specifically Cut Deep feels significant.
Okay, that's good to know. Then let's move on and talk about the next card.
Yeah, so Blaze Headlong is, I think, one of my favorite Fang cards. Another 4 Go Again style card. This one needs you to have played a red card to get Go Again, but this works nicely with the front pump, so you can go Cut Deep, Blaze Headlong, it gets Go Again. Then notably your dagger is then going to be your second Draconic Chain Link, which can often give you kind of like another +1 value if it's like a Blistering Blade where it's +2 but +3 on second Chain Link. There's quite a few effects like this where you get a bonus for the second Chain Link on the Draconic attack reacts. So Blaze Headlong, really nice for enabling that, in addition to just being a 0 for 4 Go Again. It's a 1 card play that is Draconic and is like a 1 card 4 and keeps all your fealties around. I really like Blaze Headlong, both in Syndra and Fang. I think the card's just like super good.
I agree with you. I think one thing though, I don't think I've ever seen this card in a draft yet.
Yeah, I think it usually is like if I pick it, it's like pack 1. It's like pack 1 pick 1 kind of thing, or pack 2 pick 1, or like maybe you get it second pick, but it doesn't go much beyond that.
Do you think because this card can't show up as a foil and there's 2 slots for a rare, is this card almost more rare than like a regular rare in the set?
I don't know if it's more rare, but like it's probably more rare than a rare that comes in 3 pitches, but I don't know if it's more rare than like Art of Dragonfire, for example. But it certainly doesn't come up that often. You don't see it super often.
Yeah, that's how it's been feeling. I've done like what six or seven drafts now, and no, six drafts now. I haven't seen this card yet. I kind of want to play with it and try it, and I just haven't had the opportunity to try it yet. It's been kind of frustrating because I know this card's good. I want to try it, but I can't try it.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Let's move on and talk about the next cards. So we have the Draconic Reacts. There's a bunch of the Draconic Reacts. Which ones are we talking about here?
Yeah, so usually the zero costs are the most flexible. They're kind of like all sort of interchangeable between the zero costs and the one costs. I guess I'm specifically talking about the starters that can be played on the first chain link. So Sisters of Fire and Brothers of Flame block for 3, but say they can only be played on the second Draconic chain link. I'm not really counting those. Those are fine cards. You can add them to help fill out your count, but they don't help you get go again on your first dagger. So you kind of need these starters. And I think regardless of what Fang deck you are, you want a few of these starters. My favorites are all zero costs. They are Tooth of the Dragon. This is an instant, so it blocks for 0, but says your next Draconic attack gets +3. This card just feels so unfair, especially in the end game, because if your opponent like blocks the first attack and then you get go again, and then you still get the +3 on the second attack, which is just like a complete blowout. But I think even if they don't block the first attack, you still get +1 and go again on the dagger, and then you get +3 on the next one. So it's still a 0 for 4 that gives you go again on your first dagger swing, and that's like kind of like the floor. And then yeah, if they overblock, it can be worth like even more than that, which is just gross, especially in the late game.
I guess a note would be this card technically isn't a reaction. It is technically an instant, so it is a zero block, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is an instant, but it functions the same way for Obsidian Firebane. So
This card, I feel like every time I lose against Fang is because they play like one or two of these Tooth of the Dragons.
yeah, I think that this is like maybe the best Draconic starter for Fang, like full stop and counting rares. I think that's kind of where I'm at with Tooth of the Dragon. I think this card's just nuts.
It's like it feels like in constructed, this is the card that I feel like my opponent plays in and go, "Oh, I'm doomed," and it doesn't change for limited either. It's like they play Tooth of the Dragon, you block for 3, and you're like, "My hand, oh, they convert so well. It's their next dagger is minimum 4. This is doomed."
Yeah, yeah, it's just so efficient, right? Like even if they block for 3 and that's all, it's like it's kind of like this bumped your dagger up to a 3 power because they gave up 3 block for it. So it's like +2 and then you get +3 on the next dagger. So it's like already a 0 for 5, which is crazy. And yeah, if they give you 2 cards, it's like is a completely game winning. So, yeah, Tooth of the Dragon really really impressive. I like this card a lot. Other notable ones are Searing Gaze. This is a 0 for 2 that on the second chain link gives the dagger on hit mark. And then Affirm Loyalty, which is also a 0 for 2. And on the second chain link, it gives you a fealty. So I think that those 0 costs that help you get the marks and the fealties kind of get a little bit of a nod for me. Affirm Loyalty better because you don't even have to hit, but it is a rare. So
Yeah, they're basically the same card functionally, right? Like, I feel like almost every time the Searing Glaze is played, it's gonna hit unless they have a defense reaction. So it's like the only time it doesn't hit. And even if they have a defense reaction, if they didn't give you like some kind of block, at least some kind of equipment block, it's still coming in for 4. So most of the D reacts only block for 3. It's just not good enough, right? Like you're still leaking 1.
yeah, yeah. And in terms of a play pattern thing, I do think if you have a D-React, giving 1 block on the second dagger swing is like actually kind of decent because of Searing Gaze, where if they play it, you can D-React it, and then you also deny the mark, and that's like actually quite a bit of value for you. So I think that's something to look out for. It's a reasonable spot to use your equipment.
Yeah, that makes sense. The last section here, we have attack actions. So Fang still wants attack actions, right?
Yeah, I think so. They're just really efficient. They're 0 for 4s or 1 for 5s. They block for 3. All really good things to have. I think the Draconic ones are pretty premium. So for the Drakai and for the Realm, no, sorry, for the Emperor. So that's the 0 for 4 and 1 for 5 are my favorites. The 2 for 6 is also okay. Hunt the Hunter is also really good. I think Hunt the Hunter is like maybe the best of them. That's the 1 for 5 Draconic. And then if you've played a red, you mark them. Kind of sticking with that theme of like when you just get to be on rate and then also get the mark, especially when it's not interactive. So all you need to do is play a red and then they can't do anything about it. It doesn't even need to hit. Hunt the Hunter is a house. This card is so good.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like in this format, you kind of work somewhat hard to not let your opponent mark you. And you do all this work, and your opponent ends with the hunt the hunter, and you're marked anyways. It feels so bad for from the player playing against hunt the hunter, right? Sometimes they play a searing gaze on their like second attack action. You put a one block, you get the defense reaction off, and they end on a hunt the hunter, and you're like, why did I even work so hard blocking the searing gaze? Mostly the free marks, they feel so unfair.
Yeah, yeah, agreed with that. And I kind of like the one cost attacks because they curve really nicely. If you have a yellow, you can go like dagger 0 for 2, which puts it up to 4, 1 for 5. So you've done a 3 card 9. You're at least on rate. If your hand scales up from there and you have like two 0 cost reacts, you can go like 0 for 4, 0 for 4 with the 2 reacts, and then 1 for 5 at the end. So that's a 4 card 13, which is like slightly above rate, and you might get the bonus for the second chain link cards. You could even get like one more value or a mark in there as well. So I think that the 1 for 5s actually play really, really nicely in Fang, and they can also just be a 0 card play with the Code of Allegiance, like we talked about. So I really like the Draconic 1 for 5s. 0 for 4 also pretty good, and I think in Fang more so than Syndra, the if they're marked, you get a fealty on the for the cycle is pretty real. Like when you get the free fealty and then you're attacking and you're like, you don't block this, I get another fealty. It's like really, really scary because even if they had 0 fealty at the start, it's like, oh, if this hits, they're at 2 fealty and they're almost online.
I feel like maybe this is what I've been missing in my Fang decks is like the one cost attacks to close the chain off essentially. Like your hands that don't include an attack at the end and your hands that do include an attack at your hand, how much of a difference do you think that makes?
Honestly, I think it's massive. I think the difference in these hands is like really, really big, and I often like arsenaling these attack actions and just like finding the spot where my hand wants it, either because like I have a yellow or whatever, and that's often what I've been doing. Like sometimes you just play it out off the top, but they're also fine to arsenal, and they also just block for 3, so you can always convert them on blocks if you need to, which is nice. You can't really get too flooded with them. I guess you can in the sense that you like might not have go again, but yeah, overall it's pretty okay.
Oh, I guess we should talk about the other attacks. Pursue cycle essentially.
Yeah, so Pursuit to the Edge of Oblivion and Pits of Despair, that's a 0 for 4 and 1 for 5 that on hit mark are also pretty good. Sound the Alarm, where you look at your opponent's hand, and if they have an attack reaction, you get to get a D react, is also pretty good. I think that all of these are pretty nice. I like that they block for 3 specifically. And I think that they're a lot better than, say, like Tip Off, which is also a critical strike, but kind of has the problem of like you lose all your fealty if it's your only play and it doesn't block. So you kind of get priced into keeping hands where you like have a Draconic react and then you also play the Tip Off and it doesn't scale as nicely. Whereas I think in this set, I really value being able to play hands of any size and being able to be like, Arachne's attacking me with like a Mark of the Black Widow. I have to be able to like block 6 on this and then just like send back like dagger, Draconic react, dagger, and like, maybe it's not the most efficient turn, but like I'm still converting my cards, and you need to have that flexibility. And I think that like Tip Off doesn't have that, but these blocking 3 does. And they also have upside, which is significant.
Okay. I guess the next question that I have would be like, would you, if you don't have, like, let's say you don't have access to the pursues because they're rares, or the draconic one cost, like the critical strikes, essentially, would you be inclined to still like include tip offs in your deck? If you can't find the 1 for 5s, otherwise.
It's okay. I don't think it's great. I might play like 1 red at most. I don't mind the blues because you can discard them to mark, and they also turn on starting point. Yeah, the reds is like 1 at most, I think. I think that they can just be pretty punishing, being non-draconic and making you fall off fealty, and also being a 2 block is like a little bit. I've had spots where it feels really bad to draw tip off, so if you need the rate, I think having 1 is okay, but more than that seems pretty sketchy to me.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. The 2 block is really punishing, and I feel like, yeah, as a generic common, it feels like a good filler card, and maybe not much more than that, then, right?
Yeah, I think so, especially in Fang. I like it a little more in Arachne and even Syndra, honestly.
Then I guess those are all the key cards that Fang really wants. Let's talk about the packages that we have for Fang right now.
So a lot of this has to do with how you're giving your daggers go again. If you're on the mark package, you have a couple ways. I think a really premium way to do this actually is knife through butter. This is a 1 for 4 that blocks for 3, so just good stats, converts really well. And it says that any of your attacks this turn that target a marked hero get go again. So you can potentially get multiple action points out of this, which is pretty crazy, especially in late game scenarios where your opponent's just like low and has to block out your attack. So knife through butter been really impressive for me. And the key to knife through butter working is you need a lot of ways to mark. I think that the mark D reacts are kind of like the most important way to make this work because you can sort of like it's like a 2 card combo sort of where you can sit on one half and then in your arsenal, then draw the other half and then be like, here's my go again enabler. So I really like knife through butter and I actually like all colors of it. The blues can be a nice way to get go again in the late game. Yellows are sort of just flexible resource card. 1 for 3 is not super good, but when you get the go again as well, it's pretty good. And then you can also pitch it if you need to, and then you get go again in your second cycle. So I actually like knife through butter at all colors in this archetype or this with this package, so long as you have the mark to support it. If you don't have the mark to support it, it's not very good.
That makes sense. I guess one note about this card is it's any attack that attacks a mark hero will get go again. So it even includes your attack action cards. I don't think it'll come up too often with this card when you are playing it, but just a note, like your 0 for 4s, if you have 2 of them, they'll also get go again if it's attacking a marked hero. So
Yeah, it has some synergy with the like for the Drakai cycle where you can like play this, play for the Drakai first when they're marked and get the go again on it, and then potentially swing with your dagger afterwards. And maybe you have a Draconic react for it, maybe you don't. But yeah, knife through butter giving action points is really, really impressive. Other than that, you can do warrior attack reactions. Basically any of them work. I think that they're like scar tissue, marks them. Incision blocks for 3. Diced is essentially a 0 for 4 if you swing twice. All of these are pretty good. And the only one I don't really like is it like take a stab, the extra swing. That one not very good. But basically, if you use a fealty on a warrior attack reaction, you get the +1 and go again, and that's pretty good. And they're all generally 1 above rate. So like normally the Draconic attack reactions are 0 for 2, the warriors are 0 for 3s. So you actually got to be a little bit more efficient, but you do have to jump through the hoop of spending that fealty. So again, you need the mark and the fealty generation to support this.
I guess in that sense, the fealty is converting for 1 extra point, right? So once you do crack the fealty to play one of these warrior attack reactions, it's like it's giving the card an extra point of value as well because the dagger gets +1 from it being draconic.
The next piece that you want for this mark package is Hunt a Killer and Sworn Vengeance. These are the warrior front pumps that give your next dagger swing on hit mark. The Hunt a Killer is the 1 for 4, and Sworn Vengeance is the 0 for 3. These cards are like fine filler-ish cards. They're not like super, super high picks, but I think that they have a role to play in this mark package. I think the key to the mark deck is that you keep marking them a lot, and then that lets you play your warrior attack reactions and turns on your knife through butters and kind of makes everything sing. If you don't have the mark package, or if you don't have enough mark for these cards, it really kind of falls apart. So those warrior front pumps are really good. And then finally, I like Starting Point in this archetype, especially because sometimes you have a bit of inconsistency where you just like don't draw the Draconic React. Maybe you don't have the fealty online yet. And Starting Point gives you the flexibility to just turn a warrior attack react sort of into a Draconic one where you get the go again. You don't get the additional +1, but it can let you swing twice, which is sometimes kind of all you need. And I think this deck's more willing to spend its fealties because it's not, since you're spending them on the reactions, you're not as likely to get Fang online. And so you can also do the fealty go again trick with the boots a little bit more easily. Whereas I think if you're like heavy Draconic and trying to get Fang online, sometimes using the fealty trick for the Starting Point is actually a little costly.
Do you think this variant of the deck wants like more yellows and like maybe a little bit less blues, or like maybe like a split of like some blues, some yellows as the resource base?
Yeah, I think having a combination of blues and yellows is good. I think that this version probably wants a little bit more blues because where the fealty heavy deck is trying to get Fang online and eventually not have to pitch at all, this deck is pitching every single turn. So you kind of want the density of blues, but you definitely can supplement with yellows as well.
Okay. So it'll be the other way around, where the next package is gonna be the deck that wants more yellows, maybe more yellows than blues, actually.
Exactly. Yeah.
What about the Draconic package? Like, what is it? Like, what cards are we looking for in that one?
Yeah, so the Draconic package doesn't necessarily want like too many super specific cards, but I think some things that characterize this package is Pledge Fealty is a card that you can play in this deck. I have really mixed feelings about this card. This is the instant that blocks for 0. It's Draconic, and it says create a fealty token. This card ranges from absolutely incredible, like you turn 0 this, you turn 0 2 of these I've had happen to me is just like incredibly unfair, to a huge liability in the late game because you are already online and then you draw this and you're like, this sure is a red that doesn't pitch because I don't need to pitch and doesn't really convert for anything. So I don't know. I think that Pledge Fealty is pretty okay. It has some of the properties of Tooth of the Dragon, where it kind of like lets you go wide and put more attacks on the second reaction. But I think the fact that you don't get the +3, you just get the fealty is a little bit costly. I don't know if I love this card, but I know a lot of people do like it, and I have been blown out by it. So kind of mixed on this card. Do you have thoughts about Pledge of Fealty?
I'm also mixed feelings about this. I don't think I've ever drafted it in my Fang deck. Maybe I should be, is like kind of where I'm at. Maybe I'm underrating this card, and like, I should be putting this card a little bit higher in my pick orders, because I have definitely had a spot where I was forced to block for 6 on the first dagger, and then my opponent just like pledged fealty to me and then just killed me on the next attack. I guess that's the same thing as a Tooth of the Dragon, but like it kind of like functions in the same. It punishes you in the same way that the Tooth of the Dragon does. It really devalues like the blocking the first attack, and then which means that but if you just block 3 on the first attack, if they just double pump it, you lose the game as well. So it's interesting. I feel like it's like if you're ahead, this card's really good, and if you
Mm-hmm.
draw it turn 0, it's like insane.
And then when you're on the back foot, this card is painful.
Yeah, if you're ever in a spot where you have to block and you draw this card, you kind of feel dumb.
I'll say that there is the fail case of like, if the rest of your hand blocks well, you can, and you're online, you can swing a dagger, give it +1 and go again, come in for 2, and then swing for 1, and then it is a 0 for 3, and you've made a fealty, and that's okay. But you do have to be online to have that, and a lot of the Draconic cards don't block that well, so the first part that I said about the rest of your hand blocking well might not actually be true. Is sort of the problem.
Yes, on the same vein, you want to talk about Proclaim the Vengeance? So this is a Draconic instant, cost 0, and it just says mark target opposing hero. If that hero is Arachne, you gain a resource. What do you think about this card?
I kind of hate this card.
You hate this card? You don't think even against Arachne it's like playable?
I've had some people assert to me that it's pretty okay against Arachne. I think it's hard because on the face, I think getting +1, a mark, and a resource and a go again out of the card is good. The issue that I have is you have to be able to spend that resource. And I think that like often your deck is constructed in a way where you're like spending your whole blue or your whole yellow. And like sometimes like yeah, you'll have the yellow and wish you had the blue, and Proclaim Vengeance will bail you out. And like maybe I haven't played enough with the card to have that upside. But I think that just like overall, I don't really like this card.
Okay. You know, like the other problem with this card is like, what about this card if you're not playing against Arachne?
Yeah, it's like this card is playable. I don't want to say you can't play it. It is a starter. It does mark, which is something. It does give you +1 and go again. It like kind of does enough, but I think it being a null block makes me want other options first. I guess is how I'd put it. It's like a bit fillerish for me.
Okay, that makes sense. If we are talking about like Proclaim and Pledge Fealty is just like significantly better, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think even against Arachne, Pledge Fealty is quite a bit better.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about Proclaim just a little bit because it's kind of an interesting card where I'm just like not sure what it's for. Yeah, it marks. I've seen people play it. I don't know if it's good, is where I'm at.
Yeah, yeah. I'm also not sure if this card is all that good.
Then let's move on and talk about other cards for the Draconic package.
Yeah, so I think you just want a lot of the reactions, especially the zero cost reactions. So like Blistering Blade is really good. This is a 0 for 2 that can become a 0 for 3 on the second Draconic Chainlink. This is also good in general, but even better in the Draconic heavy deck. I think that the two costs +3 that gets one cheaper per Draconic Chainlink is also pretty strong in this archetype because you have more reactions and it can kind of be like a 0 for 3 on the second Chainlink or a 1 for 3 on the first Chainlink. That card is quite good in this archetype.
Yeah, the dynastic dedication.
Yeah, Dynastic, that one. I think that this archetype is willing to play the second Chainlink React. So Sisters of Fire in particular, I'm pretty high on because when you're online, this is a 0 for 3, which is also Draconic, so it's like a 0 for 4. And it also blocks for 3, so when you're not able to get that second swing, you can just block with it. And something about the Draconic Reacts is sometimes playing multiple on one dagger is a little bit punishing because you don't get the +1 from Blistering Fireblade multiple times. So if you just play like 2 0 for 2 reacts, the first one puts you up to 4, but the second one only puts you up to 6, which is not really good. You actually just played a 0 for 2, whereas Sisters of Fire is still worth 3 all the time. So I kind of like Sisters of Fire. Not as like a super high pick, but I think it's a pretty reasonable card that I actively would be wanting like one or two of them in the Draconic heavy deck.
Would you say you're trying to pick this up kind of later in the pack than earlier?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's harder to this card's a little harder to enable in the other deck. And it's not like one of its big strengths is that it works when you get Fang online, which the Draconic deck is a little better at doing because you don't have to spend your fealties.
Okay, so this is one of those cards where you're like, once you're Draconic heavy, you're starting to look for this card, and if you're Draconic light, you kind of want to pass it along and get the like be more of the mark package side, right?
Yeah, I think so. You can still play this card because it blocks for 3, but I think it's just like a lot less premium because I don't know. You have other cards that block for 3.
Yeah, I think the first time I drafted Fang, I had like a Sisters of Fire and Arsenal, and I couldn't play it for like 3 turns, and it lost me the game.
Yeah, I think that the trick to this card is don't be afraid to block with it when it's bad, but it is pretty good.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. It was like my first draft with Fang of the set too. So once you get punished by it, you understand. Don't arsenal this card. It can be such a big liability.
Yeah, it really can be, but it's also not a disaster to Arsenal, assuming that you have the Draconic attack react density, because it's essentially like a 0 for 4, and it also blocks for 3. This is kind of like a conditional cut deep that's like reaction speed and lets you. It also plays well with the Draconic attack action, so you can do like pitch a blue, 0 cost react, pitch a blue, Sisters of Fire. You've done like 4 into 5, which is 9, and then you can play a 1 for 5 at the chain ender, and that's pretty good.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anything else you looking for with the Draconic stuff?
I put Code of Allegiance. I think both decks want it, but the Draconic one is a little more red heavy, so bailing yourself out with Code of Allegiance is more relevant.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I guess, is there a preference on like which side you like a little bit better right now?
Fang is the hero I've drafted the least. I think I like the warrior side a bit better. Blocks really well, and that makes your games a little more stable. I think it also makes a difference between first and second smaller because you can choose to defend and not just get blown out if they have a lot of damage going second. The Draconic package tends to have hands that don't block very good and can. I think it can like run really hot where if you get Fang online super fast, it just feels really unfair. And when you get ahead, it's like you almost can't lose. I think it plays poorly from behind though, and when you draw your pledge fealties late, it feels bad. And when you have to block and you have a handful of 2 block Draconic reacts, it also feels bad. So I think like my personal preference is the warrior package, but I think the Draconic package is still good. It's just a little more volatile.
I feel like the Draconic packages are typically the games where you look at a Fang game and you're like, how does his opponent win? No, there was just like no way that that player was going to win the game. Whereas the Mark package feels like the games are always going to be close and you'll have to kind of like play good games of flesh and blood to win the game.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. I think the Draconic package definitely has a higher ceiling, but is a little bit more finicky.
Definitely seen a Draconic Fang deck that just like puts so much reaction damage and devalues their opponent's hand so much, and you're like, wow, how was that fair? And then you watch their next game and you're like, one of their hands blocked for 8. It's just like, what's going on? Like, how did I lose this Fang deck?
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting, and I think that you can blend between these packages. You can wind up somewhere in the middle, and that's okay too. So we'll talk about that a bit in the deck outline. But yeah, you can have a mix of these packages, and that's okay.
Let's move on and talk about the overrated and underrated card next. Honestly, when I was looking at the list of cards, I didn't really have that many cards to talk about in the overrated. I was like, this card's overrated? It's fine. And I was just like looking for cards to put on this list. The first card we have here, Scalding Iron, with a question mark on it.
Yeah, this is a zero cost react that gives your dagger +1 for each Draconic Chainlink. So often this will be a 0 for 1 that gives you Obsidian Fire Vein text as well. So it'll be like a 0 for 2, but it's like an actual 0 for 2. So I think it's just like worse than all the other zero cost reacts. If you get to the second Chainlink, it's a 0 for 2, which means it's like comparable but doesn't get the upside. I guess there's a world where you get it to a third Chainlink, but like that's tough. And even then, it's not crazy.
Wait, at that point, it's just a Sisters of Fire, right? Like, it's a worse Sisters of Fire.
I would say that like this is a card you can play if you need starters. I like it more than the Proclaim Vengeance, the Mark instant, but I would hope to not include this card in my deck, especially not multiples. If you have like one of these in your deck because you need to go again, that's fine. I've played it before, but it's not aspirational.
Okay, you know the problem with me putting this in the overrated section?
Hmm?
I don't even know if this card's even overrated. Like, do people even pick this card that often?
I don't know.
I don't think so, right? So I don't. That's why I had the biggest like. Do I even put this card on this list? Because like, I don't think people like this card.
Yeah.
But I feel like this is a good spot of talking about all the rest of the Draconic attack reactions is fine. Like they're all more serviceable and like they all kind of do the same thing. So none of the Draconic attack reaction feel overrated.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. I think that they're all pretty reasonable.
Then let's talk about the next card here. Which card is this? Rake over the coals.
All your Draconic Chainlinks get +1 for the turn, and it's a Draconic instant, so it does function as a starter. This is okay. Kinda does the Tooth of the Dragon impersonation, where it devalues your opponent's blocks on the first link, but they do still get the full 3 block out of it. And then you do ship +1 to the next chain. So that is like okay. This is like technically kind of like a 0 for 3 if you attack twice. But it's an instant. So it doesn't block and it feels a little bit expensive. Like just like to have in your deck. Like it's a bit of a liability because it doesn't block, I guess is what I mean.
Yeah, I think it not devaluing the first attack is like it kind of feels like a downside. I know it's not a downside because like like they've already blocked for 3, but the first pump that this card is giving isn't usually relevant, and I have an issue with that of like this card feels like a pledge fealty, but I guess it gives 1 power. But is a fealty token just typically better than just 1 more power?
I think it might be. I think I like Fudge Fealty better than this card.
One last thing about Rake over the coals: this card's are rare. I hate opening this card as my rare.
Yeah, this card's kind of bad.
Yeah, it's like the most depressing rare I think in the set when I see it in the pack.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. The last card we'll put on here is maybe a bit of a hot take. I don't think people necessarily will agree with me on this, but I'm putting Fire and Brimstone here with a question mark as well. This card's I'll start by saying this card's pretty okay. It blocks for 3. It does like it gives your daggers +1 and you can swing an additional time. So it kind of does the Rake over the coals thing, but it does cost 2 and gets reduced per Draconic Chainlink. So often if you play this on the first Draconic Chainlink, it will cost you 1 resource. So it's kind of like a 1 cost 3 block Rake over the coals that gets you to swing multiple times. Now, that's all right. It being able to block for 3 is a big plus. It being able to be a starter as well is a big plus. And it does have the upside of if you keep a big hand and you get to have a bunch of Draconic attack reactions and keep reacting and keep swinging and you get like multiple swings, like you get like 1 or 2 extra swings out of this, the ceiling is really, really high. The problem I have with this card is that usually to swing multiple times like this, you kind of need to have Fang already online, which usually feels like you're winning, and then you need a big hand with a bunch of Draconic attack reacts, which also already usually feels like you're winning. So while this is a power play, I kind of feel like it's a little win more. Like I've played with this card a little bit, and I've played against this card a little bit, and I've never been like super like, wow, this card's great. I can imagine it doing the thing, but I have yet to see it. And I kind of feel like if you just keep like a 4 card hand with 4 draconic attack reactions, and like this is one of them, and you have Fang online, like you probably just like won the game already. Like I don't know if you like need this card to win the game.
If you imagine if this card was like, let's devalue it quite a bit, like a dynastic dedication, it's the same cost, pumps for 3. If it was that instead, it'll be pretty close. It'll be like significantly worse. I feel like you're still winning that game, right? If you have 3 fealties and have all the other requirements.
Yeah, like you probably put your opponent in a spot where they like have to block on like either your first swing or your second swing, and you can just react a bunch over the top on either the first or the second swing if they don't block. And if they block like 6 and 6, you can just kind of like get tempo and arsenal a card, and you're probably in a really winning spot. I think usually like once Fang is online, if he is also able to keep a big hand, the game's like over. Sometimes, honestly, when Fang's online and has enough health to just keep like 1 card hands and block, like the game is also over. So I think Fang getting online is like a pretty real win con. And I don't know if I want a card that like rewards me for getting online. I feel like just like being online is the reward already. I don't know if I need a card that like grinds my opponent into the ground once I'm online. Hunt's End is kind of the same category, especially unlimited. It's just like, yeah, it's a 0 for 4 block 3. That's a starter once I'm online, but like I'm probably already winning. It's fine because it blocks 3. I just don't think it's like a super high pick.
That makes sense. You know, the one thing about the Fire and Brimstone is that it's a legendary card, which means like it's only in limited. You can play like 2 or 3 copies of Fire and Brimstone if you get it. Where else can you do this? That has to be some kind of plus, It's like a flavor plus. You get to play like 2 to 3 Brimstones. It's kind of sick,
It is kind of sick.
right? Because like they all stack with each other, don't they?
They do. They do.
That'd be so cool.
It would be very cool. I don't know how like realistic or good it is, but it would be very cool.
If you get multiple Fire and Brimstone, I think the whole goal of that draft should be to resolve multiple Fire and Brimstones in the same turn. That's not how you win this draft format, but at least you get to do it and you can tell your friends that you've done it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know. I'm also gonna say that like I'm willing to be wrong on this card. Like there's a world where I'm wrong and I'm underrating this card because I know people. I've talked to a number of people that really like drafting Fang and feel like they draft him a lot and really understand him. And most of them tend to rate this card a lot higher than I do. So it's possible that I'm just underappreciating this card. But I don't know. I need to see it be impressive before I'm like, wow, this is a high pick. Because a lot of times, I feel like whenever I draft this card, I just block with it, to be honest.
But to be fair, a Draconic reaction that blocks for 3 is nice.
Yeah, it's nice. I think that people see this and they're like, wow, this is a bomb. And I think where I'm at currently is like, I'd rather have Blaze Headlong over this. I'd probably rather have like a Firm Loyalty over this. I'd rather have Tooth of the Dragon over this. I think those are just like better cards than this. I don't know if that's true, but like that's how I feel right now.
Honestly, I can't really say much because I haven't had like much success of this format. I feel like this is like the most struggled. This is the format that I've struggled the most with. I don't know if it's like just me getting unlucky or if it's like just like variants coming in or if I'm like missing something. But yeah, I can't win in this format no matter what I do. Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, this format is tough. I think that there is some variance. I think it's also just like very punishing both to draft and play. And yeah, hopefully you'll be able to figure it out. And hopefully our episodes will, being able to talk about it will help you out a little bit. But yeah, I'm curious to see how this format goes for you as you practice because you're planning to play PT London, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely be practicing a lot more right before London as well. So hopefully by then I'll get a better hang of this format. But yeah, I don't know. The Arachne flips feel so unfair sometimes.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
sometimes the Fang reactions feel like they have the +3 when you don't want them to. So I don't know. It is something. Yeah, enough about that. Let's move on to the underrated cards. I think the first card you have here is Sisters of the Fire. I was kind of low on this card until you talked to me about it honestly just now. Why do you think this card is underrated?
I think it just lets you do the thing that I've been talking about this episode, where like you want your cards worth 3, you want to convert for 12, and Sisters of Fire is just like kind of the perfect card to do this. You like have extra cards, you can swing it. It's like a 0 for 3 if you double up on reacts. It's a 0 for 4 if you like don't double up on reacts. It doesn't work on your hand or they're hitting you too hard. You just block with it and block down on cards. It just kind of like it's just like a nice card. I don't think it's like a super high pick, but it's like a solid, I don't know, like extender that just kind of like helps you convert hands of various sizes. And I value that in this format a fair bit. So I think I'm often picking this around like pick 6, 7-ish. But yeah, I think it's pretty good. I'm pretty happy to have like 1 to 2 of these in my deck.
The next card I have underrated is Costed Attacks. I put it down here. We talked a lot about Critical Strikes being good. I've been pretty impressed with even the 2 cost, like For the Realm. I've had my opponent like pitch a blue, attack with a dagger, react. Typically, I don't like blocking the first attack because I can get Tooth of the Dragon. So like I take 4 and then they come at me for the realm for 6, and you're just like, this is kind of a big attack.
3-card 10, very good. That's kind of what you want, right? You just want to be on rate, and yeah, For the Realm's good. It also is a 2-card hand as a 2-card 6, which is still fine. So yeah, I like that card quite a bit, and I agree with you. The costed attacks are really good. Then the final one we have is Yellow Cut Deep. We talked about this card too, but just always worth 3, is also a resource card, so you're less likely to brick on reds, and just kind of does it all. I like these cards that just like consistently convert for 3 in this format a lot.
I just feel like this card in particular just like wheels a lot, and like remember looking at a pack with like I wouldn't be in Warrior. I'll look at a pack and be like, oh, there's like 2 kind of good Warrior cards, and then I come to the wheel to pick up the pack and I still see the Yellow Cut Deep and I go, wow, none of the Warriors took it, and I'm pretty sure there's like 2, maybe 3 Warriors in this pod. So I just feel like maybe people are picking up other cards that's not Cut Deep, and I'm just feeling like Yellow Cut Deep feels better than most blue 3 blocks. What do you think, Yuki? Do you think a blue 3 block is better than Yellow Cut Deep?
It's kind of close. I think it depends what your deck needs. I think that Fang, we're moving on to the deck outline next, but I think that Fang is like the most contextual in terms of what he wants. He's very weird because if you don't have any Draconic attack reactions and like ways to get go again, your deck doesn't work. It doesn't do anything. But I've also done the opposite and just like drafted all the Draconic starters. I'm like, Draconic starters are good. You need Draconic starters to play Fang. And then you wind up with this draft deck that has like 13 Draconic starters that are like block 2s and block 0s. And you're like, this isn't good either. And like, if I play multiple of these on the same dagger, it gets devalued. So I actually don't want 13 of these. Like, that's actively bad. So I think there's like a sweet spot for it. And I think a lot of the Fang deck is about having like the right packages, the right combinations, the right ratios. And I don't know if I have all of that completely locked down, but I'm starting to get a feel for it. And hopefully we can sort of give you a bit of an idea of how to think about it. But I think that Fang deck building is like pretty fluid, and there's a pretty wide range of ways your Fang deck can look and still function okay.
So with that being said, let's move on to the deck outline for Fang. I guess, as always, we should just start with talking about the blues. How many like blues do you want in this deck?
Yeah, I would say between 7 and 10 blues. I would lean 7 if I'm on the fealty heavy package, and more towards the like 9 to 10 range if I'm on the warrior end. And in addition to blues, I'm going to talk about yellows. So I think you want 10 to 15 resource cards in Fang. This is going to be yellow plus blues. Having some reactions in your resources, or like cards like Knife Through Butter, so you can get go again in your second cycle, is really, really premium. So stuff like Incision or Nip at the Heels, as like blue attack reacts that get +1 that you can fealty to get go again, I think are really premium, and you want a few of these. But yeah, I want about 10 to 15 of these resource cards. The more that you have cards like Yellow Cut Deep, the more that you can go towards the 15 end, and the more that your blues are just blues that block 3 and don't have too much text, the lower on that end that you want to go. But I definitely had a Fang deck that had like 9 blues, 6 yellows, and a bunch of the yellows were just like pretty consistently worth 3. And I was like, this deck is great. Like, it's so hard to brick on reds because I just have so many blues and yellows. And if I draw a bunch of the yellows, like they still just convert for 3, or I can block for 3 with them. Like, I just have so much agency, and I'm never really like falling behind on rate. And I think that that's like actually just really powerful in this format.
Also makes sense that because of how the class cards are oriented, most of your reds are gonna block for 2 in this deck, right? So if you want to be able to, like, just, like, block out for a turn, you kinda want more yellows and blues in your hand than not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So in addition to the resource cards, you need ways to get go again. I'm gonna say you want about 10-ish ways to get go again. What do we mean by that? The most obvious one is the Draconic starters. I think regardless of which type you are, you want a few of these. I'm gonna put like 4 to 10 Draconic starters. So if you're the fealty heavy side, you can have a lot of these Draconic starters. If you are the warrior side, you might have 4 to 7 range, depending. And the lower you are in Draconic starters, the more you need of the other ways to get go again. So, what do we mean by that? We mean warrior reacts with mark and fealty generation so that you can turn those into pseudo reactions. Like, so if you have like 4 Draconic starters and you don't have warrior reacts, even if you have lots of mark, you don't actually have go again. Similarly, knife through butter and mark is another way to get go again. So really, you're looking for either those warrior reacts or the knife through butter to pair with the mark cards. And the good thing is that like all Fang decks want mark, so you're not stretched too wide. Although I think that the more warrior heavy you are, the more you value that mark. But yeah, you kind of want to blend there. And then the final one is going to be starting point. Again, you ideally have some warrior attack reacts to pair with starting point, and that gives you some consistency, but that is another source of go again. So I think if you have about 10-ish sources, it feels like enough. As you start to fall below that, you're going to start having hands that don't have access to go again and can sometimes feel a little bit bad to play. You don't necessarily need go again in every single hand, but you want most of your hands to have go again, I would say.
That makes sense. And I guess if you're on, like, the warrior side of the cards, like, they almost all block for 3, so it's kind of easy to, like, give up your hand and just block for 9 or something, right?
Yeah, you're pretty willing to do that. You're also a little bit more because you're spending your fealty more actively. You're not really trying to get Fang online. And even if you block out and you lose one fealty, it's not where you want to be, but it feels like a play you can do and still be in the game. Whereas I think that when you're on the Draconic deck and you're like at 2 fealty and you're actively trying to get Fang online and you have a handful of reds, you just get these really weird spots where you like kind of need to keep your hand so that you can play your Draconics and not lose your fealties and convert. But then you take a lot of damage and your turn's not all that good. And you kind of, the bricks are really punishing and you don't have nearly as much agency. So that's kind of like a big difference between the way these two decks play.
I see the next point you have here says you should be able to spend a whole blue. What do you mean by this?
You just want to have, like, often your daggers will be 2 resources and you want ways to spend that blue. That can be the 1 cost reacts. You go like dagger, 0 cost, dagger, 0 cost, 1 for 5. That spends a whole blue. You can add a 1 for 4 pump in there. You can add a 1 cost react in there. Those are all ways to spend a whole blue. But I think the point is like, if all you're ever doing is playing 0 costs, you kind of end up really below rate. You'll most often end up playing 3 card eights where you like pitch a blue, come in for 4, pitch a blue, come in for 4. Even if it's like a blistering blade and you come in for 5, like you're then on rate at 9 points, which is fine. But if you have a 1 cost in there, you're going to get 1 more point of value, and you can often end up getting like a 3 card 10, which is more where you would like to be. So I think that having ways to spend these blues is really important, and that while the 0 costs are premium because they're more flexible, you want some 1 costs too. So if you notice your deck being almost all 0 costs, you want some 1 costs unless you're like really heavy on that turbo fealty plan. And in that case, you're like sacrificing a bit of value early for more value later, and that can be okay. But in general, I think you want to be able to spend your blues efficiently. And to do that, you need some 1 cost. I think I like somewhere around a 1 to 2 ratio, like one cost for 2 0 costs, maybe even slightly less, like maybe like 1 to 2.5. But somewhere in that realm, I think feels about right. But yeah, I think actively having some 1 cost in your deck is really important. If you're like all 0 costs, I think the deck usually feels pretty bad. Unless you just have infinite 0 for 4s. If you have a bunch of cut deeps and twist and turns and cut from the same cloth, it doesn't really matter. But those cards should be pretty contested, I think.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. The Fang decks that don't perform are the ones that are like, even though they're reacting every turn, when you look at it, pure damage output side, coming in for less than 9 for 3 cards. And that's just not going to be good enough against both Syndra and Arachne, actually.
Yeah, it's just kind of not strong enough in general in this format. If you do it once or twice, it's fine. You just can't. If that's what you're doing every turn, your deck's just not going to be good.
And then the last thing you have here says 2 to 5 red attacks.
We talked about these. Basically, all the 0 for 4s and 1 for 5s are good. I like the Draconics. The rare cycle generics are good too. But ideally, these block for 3. And these do the same thing. They help you get right.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Some of my Fang decks just like were missing the red attacks, and they felt so bad. It's like, yeah, you really need a way to essentially play a chain ender. That's what it kind of feels like. I know this isn't Ninja, but that's kind of what you need here.
Yeah, because you get lots of go again from the Draconic reacts. But if you're not, like, if you go like attack, react, and then you end your turn, you're like wasting your action point. As we know, attacks without go again are usually worth a little more than attacks with go again. Like you can get like a 0 for 4 without go again, but a 0 for 3 with go again is like kind of the typical rate. So just like being able to use that action point and get full value out of it is usually the way that you have really efficient turns as Fang.
So yeah, so that was the deck outline. Do you want to go quickly over just like bullet points what the deck outline should be?
7 to 10 blues, lower if you have more fealty, higher if you're more warrior heavy, 10 to 15 resource cards total. That's your yellows plus your blues. Having some reactions or knife through butters in there is really good. So you have go again. And the more of the like 3 go again yellows that you have, like cut deep, the better. And the higher the resource cards you can run in your deck, I guess. Also, cards like put into context, so the D-react is like a blue you can arsenal is also helps you play more blues. At least 10 ways to get go again. These is a combination of your Draconic starters, your warrior reacts plus mark, your knife through butter plus mark, and your starting points. And then you should have ways to spend a whole blue, so mix of 1 cost and 0 cost, somewhere around like a 1 to 2 or 1 to 2.5 ratio, and then 2 to 5 red attacks as well as chain enders.
Okay, perfect. We continuously throughout the episode talked about the playstyle. Did you want to go over this again, or can we move into the matchups for Fang?
Yeah, I think we talked enough about playstyle of the two styles, like the Draconic heavy and warrior heavy. Warrior being better at blocking, fealty heavy being a little bit more aggressive and higher ceiling. The last thing that I will say is that, just as a general rule, I think Fang is really, really, really good when your opponent gets low on life because you get to do the warrior thing where they have to block around your reactions. And if they have the D reacts, they can make good blocking decisions. If they don't have the D reacts, they're almost completely lost. So I think that just as a rule of thumb for Fang is if you're able to trade down to like you're both at 2 and you can keep some cards, that's almost always something you want to do because your reactions are so powerful in the end game.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If you can kind of force both players to be at like 2 to 3 range, you put them in hell. So I guess the flip side of this is if you're playing against Fang, you don't want to trade down on life if you can.
Yeah, I think picking when you go low on life in this format is really important. And I guess I'll give the caveat that Arachne can also be really scary at low life because of the reactions and because the daggers are so good. We'll talk about that more in the Arachne episode, but I think Arachne might actually have the best end game. So all the heroes are scary when you're low. Syndra's also scary. Her kunai loop is scary. So I think the heroes, like, if you can get low life totals and keep your cards is really powerful. But just, yeah, be aware of that as Fang, that you're trying to get to that spot.
Then let's talk about the matchups, and this will include if you want to go first or second. Do you think, I guess in this format, I have a feeling that you just want to go second all the time. Is that true?
I think so. Some people have said that they like going first in the Arachne mirror. I don't know if I'm quite there yet, but I think that the Arachne mirror is at least the place where it matters the least. I think every other matchup you want to go second.
Okay, that makes sense. Then what about if you do go first? Is there anything to keep in mind?
Usually, if you swing your dagger, your opponent will block 2 cards on your first dagger. This sometimes means you can double react over it to leak damage, or you can also just like do that, pledge fealty or draconic react, swing another dagger, get potentially 4 cards out of their deck, and that can help you towards the fatigue endgame, where I don't know if Fang's primary strategy is to fatigue, but your games can end up fatigue, so taking cards out of deck is pretty good. Just make sure you're not losing your arsenal to do less than 2 damage. So if you're able to lose your arsenal and do like 3 damage and mark them, that's probably worth it, or even 3 damage, probably worth it. But if you are going off arsenal and you're leaking like 1 or 2, not so good.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like this is gonna be like a same tip for almost every, every set, every matchup. But yeah, just don't lose your arsenal going first. That's basically what you get for going first is an arsenal card, and basically nothing else in this game. So, and I guess like the fatigue math portion. So other than that, just like if you're gonna play 4 cards and then your opponent blocks with 4 cards and they don't leak any damage, that's just like not a good play you can make, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. And similar to Syndra, more 3 blocks, more D reacts that will help you play when you have to go first. I think that just your ability to block helps you not just get blown out. Because I think the problem is like if your deck doesn't block and your opponent just goes, oh, okay, I go second, here's 12 damage, you just can't really block and you can never catch up. Whereas if you have the agency to block and slow the game down, you have the chance for them to stumble. You have the chance to find your powerful hands and play a bit of a longer game. And the first second feels, I think the longer the game goes, the less that the difference between first and second matters.
Okay, yeah, that does make a lot of sense. Let's talk about the specific matchups. Let's talk about Arachne first. I guess pretty simply, if you are playing against Arachne, um, you want defense reactions. I think we talked about this last time as well in Syndra. Nothing really changes here. Yeah, you just need defense reactions to stop the on hits. You don't have the leapfrog equipment to be like a equipment defense reaction. So instead, you need to use the red alert equipment, kind of strategically, and find spots where you can convert the red alert equipment to block for 2. That's typically how you're gonna get the most edge against Arachne.
Yeah, I agree with that.
As a note, once Arachne is flipped, most of the Arachne after they're flipped has a attack reaction just like built into them. So that would probably be like the easiest time for you to block with the red alert to convert for 2. Mostly if their on hit is pretty powerful.
Yeah, I agree with that. Another thing to be aware of against Arachne is they do have a trap called Hunted or Hunter, which is a 0 for 3 D-React assassin trap. And it says, when this defends and the attacking hero is played or activated an attack reaction this chain link, they lose 1 life. Fang plays lots of reactions, surprise to nobody, but this card is a pretty real way to lose a game. So just be aware that sometimes you need to go to 1 and just like force them to have it, but going to 1 against Arachne is a little dangerous because of this trap. Sometimes even 2, if they have a lot of cards in deck and you think they could have 2 of the traps, it can be a little scary. So if you've seen like a lot of those traps going around late, or you pass them to the Arachne, just like be aware of that card. I think it's really important in the matchup.
Mm-hmm. One note that I've seen once was an Arachne tried to play Hunted or Hunter against the Tooth of the Dragon. That doesn't work. You just need to make sure that the when you block as an Arachne with Hunted or Hunter, that they played an attack reaction and not an instant. So like Pledge Fealty and Tooth of the Dragon are not attack reactions, even if they play at attack reaction speed.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. Okay, on to Syndra. Generally, Syndra doesn't block that well. She has the worst blocks in the format, so this is often a bit of a damage race and an efficiency race. Fang often pulls ahead at low life totals because you have the reactions, and Syndra kind of needs to draw the D reacts where you pull really ahead. And the last point is just make sure you don't get blown out by leapfrog equipment. So both if you're relying on an on hit and leapfrog can cover it, just be aware of that. And also remember that it can jump from chainlink 1 to chainlink 2, and that especially if you don't need the second chainlink bonus, you should be closing the chain. But just always do the math. Do you get more damage by closing the chain or by not closing the chain?
It's hard for your opponent to tell if you do need the second chain link or not. So just like don't give it away through just like live tells essentially. I definitely got in some live tell by my opponent being like, You look at them, they have the face of like they're like thinking about their hand and how it's lining up, and they're like, oh, they need to have the second chain link, and I'm like, I see, this is the spot to use my leapfrog equipment. A little bit of a poker face will go a long way if your opponent not blocking with the leapfrog when you don't want them to.
Yeah, yeah, definitely a good tip.
It's just like something that's come up like twice is like my opponent's like looking at their hand and like their equipment or sorry their weapons, and I can like kind of feel it's probably like a Sisters of Fire or like sorry a Sizzling Steel, is it the one that's like +4 if it's a second chain link? I guess that one doesn't really matter too much, but
Brothers of Fire, Brothers of Fire.
yeah, or Brothers of Flame, yeah.
Sizzling Steel is also a 1 for 4, but it doesn't block 3. It's 1 for 4 on the second chain link, 1 for 3 on the first chain link.
Oh, okay, yeah. But so Sizzling Steel doesn't actually matter if they block if you have a leapfrog or not. But yeah, yeah. I'm just letting people know, like, don't just give it away with your tells.
Final matchup, we have Fang. D reacts, super, super good. Help you not get blown out by Tooth of the Dragon and Pledge Fealty. Also help you play around tough blocking decisions in the late game. So those D reacts are really, really valuable. And I think that identifying spots where you should be saving them rather than blocking with them is pretty important. Like arsenaling these is really good. You want your cards to block for 3. So find spots where they will actually block for 3, where you think they'll react. Try to not overblock too much, especially on the first chain link, as stuff like Tooth of the Dragon will blow you out and you'll lose a lot of value. So be careful of that. And finally, try to block out the mark effects. So Sworn Vengeance or Hunt a Killer are like face up ways to mark. You can block those out. Those are probably the easiest ones to block out. And then there's also some things to be aware of, like Searing Gaze on the second chain link. You can potentially use like equipment plus D reacts to help navigate that and help block those out in certain spots as well. So yeah, just try and stop the mark. Once you're marked, they're going to get the fealty. Like it's just a matter of time. You can't block everything out, but you can stop the mark, and that's kind of the way to play against Fang.
Mostly Swarm Vengeance, just like I've seen some people just like let Swarm Vengeance dagger hit, and I'm like, you should probably put like at least a 4 in front of it, right? Like, don't give it to them for free.
Yeah, that's really true.
I feel like that's basically everything we wanted to say about Fang.
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, that's how to draft Fang in a nutshell. I think that there's a lot to explore with this hero. In some ways, he's like the most approachable because he has the most like he's kind of like the most mathy and the most traditional fab deck in a lot of ways in terms of like how he plays his turns, how his value works, and all of that. But I do think that there's quite a bit of depth too with the different packages and being able to blend them together. So if you're looking for edges in your Fang draft, I think learning how to use all the different cards is pretty important. And I think that a lot of the warrior cards are playable. I think they basically almost all have a job. So the better you can learn that, the better that you will do with Fang. Hopefully this episode helps you out. Best of luck to you at your road to nationals and beyond. And we'll see you all next week. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find us on social media. Che is at Ueda Che. I'm at Yukili Bender. That's over on Twitter or X. I'm also at Yukili Bender over on Blue Sky. And we have a Patreon, patreon.com/onthebobble, as well as an email, which is onthebobble@gmail.com. So if you want to submit questions or feedback, feel free to get in touch with us, and we'd love to hear from you. All right. Thanks for listening. Have a good night, everyone. Bye for now.